Alright everybody, and welcome back to my channel, and today we're going to be doing something we have never ever done, and this goes back to that whole villages and more thing. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the Tekky Designs Misting Pumpkin. Let's get into it. Okay, so before we get started here, a little housekeeping notes for you. If you follow my channel closely, you know there was no video this past Friday. The reason for that is, you know, I'm super diligent about every single Friday posting a video, and we have literally since the start of this channel. However, as of the recent weeks, roughly past couple weeks, I've been having some big computer problems, and my backup system was is in the shop for a screen repair. So I kind of patched something together to kind of make this content for you. Other than that, there's nothing else going on. It's simply just me trying to get my system kind of built and figuring out what's next and all these different things. I'm not super tech savvy. But anyways, so hopefully in the coming weeks here, everything will be back up and running. But for now, I've patched this system. So if the weeks are a little inconsistent here coming up, that is what's going on. But we will be back on track here in no time. Now, let's talk about why we're here today. So we are going to be taking a look at the Tekky Designs, also known as Tekky Toys, Misting Pumpkin. This is something that I picked up a couple years ago that we display in our house. It's kind of cool. It's not the most authentic thing in the world. So just a quick little backstory about Tekky Toys, and I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. There's some kind of design company that has like licensing deals with places like Party City and Spirit of Halloween. I think they like make the products and then license them to them or something like that. I didn't go super dive into their backstory and stuff. I just know that they kind of all work together in some fashion. Moving on, let's talk about the piece itself. It was released in 2020 and the SKU number off the top is 58649, and that is the SKU number for Tekky Toys themselves. As for the dimensions, we have 9 inches tall, 8.75 inches wide, and 8.75 inches in depth. Now let's talk power. This thing uses 3 AA batteries, and there is no alternative power supply, so if you were going to attempt something like that, you'd have to get out that soldering iron and get to work. But for the rest of us people, we have to use our 3 AA batteries. Now let's talk about the runtime of this thing. It is a misting pumpkin. They put on the box about 6 hours of runtime. I personally don't know that if you leave it on constantly that tank will support 6 hours. It's a very, very small tank. However, I do believe that the batteries would probably support somewhere in that range. You know, it depends on how you run it, and we're going to talk about that now. The switch. So the switch has a couple different options. There is a sensor option, which just kind of goes by when, you know, someone walks by or makes a loud noise, that kind of thing. It's not ultra sensitive, but it is on the sensitive side. It has a constant on. Now that will keep the lights going, the sound going, the whole thing in the mist. That will drain everything extremely quickly. So I don't know if that 6 hours of runtime is based on the always on or just on the average use of a sensor, which would probably be my guess. But look, you know, I'll be honest with you, I don't change the batteries on this thing that many times throughout the month of October, and it for the most part stays going for most of the month. But I am filling the water semi-often. It's a small tank, so it really just depends on how you run it. I don't run it on constantly on, so the water is used a little more sparingly. Also, I would like to note that when you do fill up this tank, it is located on the bottom alongside the switch. It is very small. You unscrew it, put your water in. I like to use distilled water on anything that takes water, any kind of misting device, just because the calcium in tap water, you know, it's just not good for it over time. A lot of companies nowadays are saying that it's cool to use that kind of stuff, and yes, it will function, but the long-term damage is just, it will prolong your piece if you stick with the distilled water. As for a soundtrack, yes, it does have one, and probably the greatest gift about this piece is that there is a separate switch on the bottom specifically for the sound. So you can have it with just lights and mist, or you can have it with lights, mist, and sound. So totally up to you. I tend to run it without sound, but on Halloween I like to switch it on. Now let's talk price. It is about $40, and I would say it's probably worth it. I had no regrets about buying it. It's lasted me now here a couple years, going into its 3rd season this year coming up, and look, every time I pull out of the box, it works, including for this review. And it does sit most of the year, so there's something to be said about the quality of the build there. Lastly, the weight. It feels to me to be somewhere in the neighborhood of a couple pounds at most. It's very, very light. You know, it's made of like a plastic, and it doesn't have a lot of weight to it. A lot of the weight is actually probably just the batteries themselves. So really light, good size for the money. But now let's go ahead and take a closer look. So starting from the top, there is a stem. Of course, it is a pumpkin. It is a good-sized stem that seems scaled to the pumpkin. Sometimes these seems to get a little wavy on the scaling. For this one, it actually works. And the paint job is not amazing on the stem nor on the pumpkin. However, there is detail actually in the molds. That's kind of interesting. So the paint job's okay, but the actual impressions on the mold is really good actually, and pretty clear. Continuing to work our way down to the pumpkin itself, like I said earlier, it is very good size, and this face that is on this thing is absolutely wild. It is a showstopper. You will stop and see this. I'm telling you, when you are walking by, the cutout on this thing is not small, and with the lights glowing behind it and the mist coming out through the mouth and the nose and the eyes, it's really, for 40 bucks, it's kind of a good deal. I gotta be honest with you. You know, the quality of the cutouts too is really nice. They're not all like kind of like they forgot to break something off in the mold or clean the mold. No, this is a really clean cutout, and it does have the black kind of within each cutout, which really helps with that depth, you know, and it really shows. It's almost like a highlight, if you will, the way that the contrast works between the cutouts and the pumpkin itself. So the next thing I want to talk to you about is how much mist do you really get on this thing. I'm going to show you here when we hit the lights. It is enough. It's not a lot though. It's enough, and it really, really depends on what kind of airflow is going on around it. If you have a fan blowing around the room, for instance, you're not going to see any of it. But when you look inside of it, you can see it. However, if you have, you know, it in a corner or something where there's not a lot of airflow or something, it actually does protrude the pumpkin, and it comes out in enough where you can actually see it. So it really depends on your placement. Again, this is a $40 pumpkin. It's not, you know, some crazy high-end thing, but for the money and what you can do with it to kind of spice things up, and I'm sure there's people out there that could repaint them or add things to them, use it as a creative base for something else. I don't know, but this is really neat. I wanted to share it with you. You know, I'm not too familiar with Tekky toys, but this is cool. So I'll be looking out here in the next season for other products that they will be releasing. Maybe we'll review some more of those. But that is the misting pumpkin. I hope you enjoyed this. I know it's completely different. I'm going to go ahead and hit the light so you can see it in all of its glory. And as always, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you on the next one.